2.9 billion versus 22 billion. That is not a rounding error. That is not a miscalculation. That is a lie, and I can prove it to you right now with the numbers they tried to hide. There is a hospital administrator in Los Angeles who just sent termination letters to 200,000 immigrants enrolled in Medicaid, not next year, not when the budget gets finalized, this week, right now, because the money is gone. If Governor Newsom's deficit was really only $2.9 billion, like he told the cameras, why is the state of California conducting the largest healthcare purge in its history? I will tell you exactly why. Because the real number, the number that the Legislative Analyst's Office just published 3 days ago, is $22 billion. That is 7.5 times larger than what the governor admitted. I'm Melissa Grant, this is Focus News, and before I show you the documents that prove this cover-up, I need you to do something right now. Tell me in the comments what state you are watching from and whether you have seen your state government play the same accounting games with your budget. Because what is happening in California right now is a warning for every single state in America. This is the only channel that is going line by line through the Legislative Analyst's Office report that Sacramento does not want you to read. If you want the truth about where your tax dollars are actually going, hit subscribe right now, because by the time I am done explaining these numbers, you are going to understand exactly how your government lies to you about money. Let me paint you the picture of what happened 3 weeks ago. Governor Gavin Newsom stood in front of the California State Capitol with a poster board. On that poster board was a graph. The graph showed a small deficit, a little bump in the road, $2.9 billion. He smiled. He said the words, manageable and on track and fiscally responsible. He promised that California's social programs were safe. He promised that the sanctuary state policies would continue. He promised that health care for undocumented immigrants was a moral imperative that California would never abandon. The reporters wrote it down. The headlines went out. California deficit smaller than expected. Newsom projects fiscal stability. Then the Legislative Analyst's Office, the LAO, the independent auditors who work for the California legislature, not the governor, released their report. And the number they published was not $2.9 billion. It was $22 billion. Let me say that again so you understand the scale of the deception. The independent auditors found a hole in California's budget that is 7.5 times larger than what the governor told you. This is not a difference of opinion about economic projections. This is not a debate about whether revenues will come in higher or lower next quarter. This is a $20 billion gap between what the man running for president in 2028 wants you to believe and what the accountants can actually prove. How do we know the auditors are telling the truth and the governor is lying? Because of what happened next. Within 72 hours of that LAO report going public, the California Department of Healthcare Services quietly published new eligibility requirements for Medicaid. And those new requirements systematically excluded 200,000 immigrants who were previously covered. Not because they committed fraud, not because they were ineligible under the law, but because California is broke and they needed to cut costs immediately. The sanctuary state, the state that promised health care as a human right regardless of immigration status, just threw 200,000 human beings off their health insurance to save money. If the deficit was really only $2.9 billion, just if the budget was really manageable, why would they do that? Why would they create a political nightmare and a humanitarian crisis unless they absolutely had to? I want you to think about what that means in human terms. 200,000 people, that is not a statistic. That is a woman in Fresno who has diabetes and was getting insulin through Medicaid and now has to choose between buying her medication or paying rent. That is a child in San Diego who has asthma and whose parents just lost access to the inhaler prescription that keeps him out of the emergency room. That is a family in Oakland where the father has been working construction for 8 years, paying sales tax on every purchase, contributing to the California economy, and his wife just got a letter saying her prenatal care is terminated. These are real people. And Gavin Newsom just decided they are expendable because he lied about the budget and got caught. Let me show you exactly how he lied. California's budget operates on a very specific calendar. The fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. Tax revenues come in throughout the year, but the big money, the capital gains taxes from stock sales, those come in during tax season in April. So when Newsom gave his press conference in early January, he was projecting revenues for the rest of the fiscal year that have not happened yet. He was assuming that California's wealthiest residents, the people who own stock in Google and Apple and Nvidia and Tesla, would sell those stocks at the same levels they did last year and pay the same capital gains taxes. The LAO looked at the same data and said, wait a minute, the stock market is showing signs of instability, tech valuations are inflated, and we cannot assume that tax revenue is going to magically appear just because we need it to. Here is the insane part. 45% of California's general fund revenue comes from personal income tax, and a huge portion of that personal income tax revenue, approximately 25% of the total budget, comes from capital gains taxes paid by the top 1% of earners in the state. Let me translate that for you. 1/4 of everything California spends on schools, roads, police, fire departments, healthcare, everything depends on rich people selling their tech stocks and paying taxes on the profits. California is not running a government. California is running a casino, and Newsom just bet the entire state budget on Nvidia's stock price staying high. What happens when Nvidia's stock drops? What happens when the AI bubble that every economist with a functioning brain can see forming finally pops? What happens when the venture capital money dries up and Silicon Valley has a bad quarter? I will tell you exactly what happens. California goes broke. Not in 10 years, not in 5 years, next year. Because the state has structured its entire budget around a gamble that tech stocks will go up forever. That is not fiscal responsibility. That is not economic planning. That is reckless, delusional, casino-style gambling with public money. And the people who are going to pay the price are not Gavin Newsom. He will be in Iowa campaigning for president. The people who will pay the price are the 200,000 immigrants who just lost health care, the teachers who will get pink slips when the school budget gets cut, the firefighters who will not get hired because there is no money left. Now let me explain the accounting trick that Newsom used to make the $22 billion hole look like a $2.9 billion bump. This is critical. Pay attention. California has a constitutional requirement to pass a balanced budget. You cannot run a deficit on paper. So what do you do when you are $22 billion short? You move money around on the calendar. You delay payments that were supposed to go out in June, and you push them into July so they show up on next year's budget instead of this year's budget. You count revenue that has not come in yet as if it already arrived. You take one-time federal grants and you pretend they are recurring income. You raid special funds that were set aside for specific purposes, like transportation or education, and you move that money into the general fund to cover the gap. And then you stand in front of the cameras and you say the deficit is manageable. The LAO went through all of those tricks and they reversed them. They said, no, if you pay the bills when they are actually due instead of delaying them, and if you count revenue when it actually arrives instead of when you hope it will arrive, and if you stop raiding special funds that are supposed to be protected, the real deficit is $22 billion. That is the difference between Newsom's fantasy math and actual accounting. And the proof that the LAO is right is that California just made the single largest cut to a social program in state history, 200,000 people off Medicaid. Because you cannot fake your way out of a $22 billion hole. Let me read you something directly from the LAO report. This is on page 47, and I want you to hear the exact language they used because it is devastating. Quote, the administration's revenue projections assume continued high levels of capital gains realizations that are inconsistent with current market conditions and historical volatility patterns. This creates significant downside risk to the budget. End quote. Translation. Newsom is lying about how much money is coming in, and when reality hits, the budget is going to collapse. Here is another quote from the same report, page 53. Quote, the proposed budget relies on approximately $11 billion in shifts, deferrals, and one-time solutions that do not address the underlying structural imbalance. End quote. Translation. Newsom is not fixing the problem, he is hiding it. And next year's governor is going to inherit a catastrophe. Do you see what is happening here? Newsom knows the budget is broken. He knows that California's revenue model is unsustainable. He knows that the state cannot keep spending money it does not have. But he does not care about fixing it because he is not planning to be governor when it falls apart. He is planning to be running for president. He is going to campaign in 2027 and 2028 as the fiscally responsible governor who balanced California's budget and managed the largest economy in America. And by the time voters figure out he was lying, by the time the checks start bouncing and the programs start shutting down, he will be in the White House, and some other politician will be left holding the bag. This is the most cynical political maneuver I have seen in years. Newsom is literally sacrificing California's fiscal future for his own presidential ambitions. He is cooking the books, kicking vulnerable people off health care, and gambling the entire state budget on a stock market bubble. Also, he can have good headlines for his campaign, and the media is letting him get away with it because they are too lazy to read the LAO report, and they just print whatever the governor's press office tells them. Let me give you some context about how insane California's budget situation has become. In the 2021 fiscal year, California had a $75 billion surplus. $75 billion. Newsom called it a record surplus, and he spent it. He spent it on expanded social programs, on universal health care pilot programs, on guaranteed income experiments, on subsidies for electric vehicles, on high-speed rail, on everything. He spent every single dollar of that surplus, and then some. And he did it based on the assumption that tax revenues would stay at record highs forever. Anyone who has ever looked at a chart of California's tax revenue knows that it is the most volatile in the nation. It spikes during booms and it craters during recessions. But Newsom spent like the boom would never end. Now the boom is ending. Tech companies are laying off workers. Venture capital funding is down 60% from its peak. Commercial real estate in San Francisco is in free fall. Wealthy residents are leaving the state because of high taxes. And suddenly that $75 billion surplus is gone, and we have a $22 billion deficit. That is a $97 billion swing in 3 years. How does that happen? It happens when you build a budget on sand. It happens when you refuse to plan for downturns. It happens when you prioritize political messaging over economic reality. And the people who are paying the price are always the same people. It is never the governor. It is never the lobbyists. It is never the consultants who get paid six-figure salaries to write reports that nobody reads. It is the immigrants who lose health care. It is the teachers who lose their jobs. It is the families who lose their public services. Because when the budget collapses, the people at the top protect themselves and they throw everyone else overboard. Let me tell you about Maria. Maria is not her real name because she is afraid of retaliation, but she is real, and her story is real. Maria lives in Los Angeles. She came to the United States from Guatemala 12 years ago. She works 2 jobs, one cleaning houses and one working nights at a restaurant. She has 3 children who were born in California and are American citizens. 2 years ago, California expanded Medicaid to include undocumented immigrants, and for the first time in her life, Maria had health insurance. She went to a doctor for the first time in a decade. She got her blood pressure medication, she got a dental cleaning. She felt like the state actually cared about her. Last week, Maria got a letter. The letter said her medical coverage was being terminated due to budget constraints. It did not explain why. It did not offer her any alternatives. It just said her insurance was gone. Maria called the number on the letter and waited on hold for 2 hours. When she finally got through, the person on the phone told her there was nothing they could do, that the state had changed the rules, and that she should look into paying for private insurance. Maria makes $22,000 a year. Private insurance costs more than she makes in rent. So now Maria is back to where she was 3 years ago. No doctor, no medication, hoping she does not get sick. Because if she does, she will have to choose between going to the emergency room and going bankrupt. That is who is paying for Gavin Newsom's lie. That is the human cost of budget manipulation. Maria did not cause the deficit. Maria did not gamble the state budget on tech stocks. Maria did not lie about the numbers. But Maria is the one who lost her health care. And there are 199 other people just like her who are going through the same thing right now. Do you want to know the worst part? The money that California is saving by kicking Maria off Medicaid is not even enough to close the deficit. The LAO estimates that cutting 200,000 people from the program will save approximately $1 billion per year. That is $1 billion out of a $22 billion hole. It is not even 5% of the problem. So California just inflicted a massive humanitarian crisis, violated its own sanctuary state principles, and betrayed 200,000 vulnerable people. And it did not even make a dent in the budget deficit. That is how bad the math is. That is how broken the system is. They are cutting people's health care for political theater, not because it actually solves anything. And here is what Newsom is counting on. He is counting on you not paying attention. He is counting on the media not reading the LAO report. He is counting on voters being too busy or too exhausted to follow the money and connect the dots. He is counting on being able to say, "I balance the budget," in a presidential debate without anyone fact-checking him. And historically, he has been right. Historically, politicians get away with this because nobody holds them accountable until it is too late. But that is why this channel exists. That is why I am going through these documents line by line. That is why I am showing you the receipts. Because the truth is in the numbers, and the numbers do not lie. Newsom said $2.9 billion. The auditors said $22 billion. Newsom said the sanctuary state is safe. The auditors said 200,000 people are losing health care. Newsom said the budget is balanced. The auditors said the state is using accounting tricks to hide a structural collapse. One of these sources is telling the truth, and one is lying, and it is not hard to figure out which is which. So what happens next? Here is my projection based on the data. In the next 6 months, California is going to announce more cuts. They are going to cut education funding. They are going to cut transportation projects. They are going to cut public employee pensions. They are going to raise fees and taxes on the middle class while giving tax breaks to corporations to keep them from leaving the state. And they are going to do all of this while Newsom is on the campaign trail telling voters in Iowa and New Hampshire that he is a fiscal genius who saved California. Then, in about 18 months, around mid-2027, the stock market is going to have a correction. It might be a small correction, or it might be a major crash, but it is coming because bubbles always pop. And when that happens, California's capital gains tax revenue is going to disappear. Suddenly, the state will be $30 or $40 billion short, not $22. And at that point, the cuts will not be 200,000 people losing Medicaid. It will be entire programs shutting down. It will be schools closing. It will be state parks being sold off. It will be a full-scale fiscal emergency, and Newsom will not be there to fix it because he will either be president or he will be running for president. And either way, California will not be his problem anymore. He will have moved on. He will have gotten what he wanted. And the people of California will be left with a broken budget, a broken promise, and a state government that can no longer function. This is not speculation. This is the inevitable result of the decisions being made right now. You cannot run a $22 billion deficit while pretending it is $2.9 billion and expect it to magically fix itself. You cannot build a budget on capital gains taxes from a stock bubble and expect it to be sustainable. You cannot kick 200,000 people off healthcare and claim you are protecting vulnerable communities. The math does not work. The lies do not hold, and eventually, reality catches up. Here is what I need you to do. First, share this video. Send it to everyone you know in California. Send it to your family members. Send it to your co-workers. Send it to your city council representative. Because the only way we stop this is if enough people understand what is happening and demand accountability. The mainstream media is not going to cover this story the way it needs to be covered. They are going to print the governor's press releases and move on. So it is up to us to get the truth out. Second, go read the LAO report yourself. It is public. It is online. It is long and it is boring, but it is real. Do not take my word for it. Do not take Newsom's word for it. Read the actual document and see for yourself that everything I just told you is backed up by the state's own auditors. Third, ask your elected representatives what they are going to do about this. Call their offices, email them, show up at town halls. Ask them how they are going to vote when the budget comes up for approval. Ask them if they are going to go along with Newsom's accounting tricks or if they are going to demand real solutions. Because right now, most of them are staying quiet and hoping this blows over. Do not let them. And finally, subscribe to this channel because I am going to keep following this story. I am going to track every cut. I am going to document every lie. I am going to show you exactly how your government is spending your money and who is getting rich while you are getting robbed. This is the only place you are going to get this level of analysis because nobody else is willing to do the work. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. It has more money, more resources, more wealth than most countries, and yet it cannot balance its budget. It cannot protect its most vulnerable residents. It cannot tell the truth about its own finances. That is not an accident. That is not bad luck. That is corruption. That is political ambition overruling fiscal responsibility. That is a governor who cares more about his next job than the people he was elected to serve. $2.9 billion versus $22 billion. A sanctuary state that kicks 200,000 immigrants off health care. A budget built on a stock bubble and a prayer. These are not minor problems. These are existential crises. And if we do not start paying attention, if we do not start demanding accountability, California is going to collapse. Not someday. Not in the distant future. Soon. I am Melissa Grant, and this is Focus News. The truth is in the numbers, and I just showed you the receipts. Do not let them lie to you. Do not let them hide the data, and do not let them get away with sacrificing real people for political gain. Subscribe, share, and hold them accountable, because if we do not, nobody will.